that community, and then on out to all humanity. Now, given that fact, it seems to me that men and husbands have a very great responsibility here. See, she can, although they are very much alike biologically and every other way, she brings something into that relationship that the man just doesn't have that fulfills him in a very significant way. So my text and my concern this morning is that husbands need to learn how to care and love for their wife in a way that is a blessing to their family. And so we're back to the beginning. How do we do that, gentlemen? Now, I'm speaking mainly to Christian men here this morning, but to any man, I think, but particularly to Christian men. Let me give you 4 words that I have gleaned from this particular text in 1 Peter 3:7. The first word is considerateness. In other words, a considerateness that never forgets its obligation. The second word is courtesy. A courtesy that never forgets her needs. And thirdly, a comprehension that never forgets her spiritual equality with him. And finally, a conscience. Considerateness, courtesy, comprehension, and finally a conscience that never forgets the danger of broken communion with God. Now let me go back to the text. Let's begin with the first event. A considerateness that never forgets its obligation. At the beginning of verse 7, in chapter 3, we read, "Husbands, in the same way as he's taught previously, be considerate as you live with your wives." Now, the word considerateness does not occur in the actual Greek text. The word is understanding. For some of the early Greek students that I have here, it's the word gnosis. It means knowledge. Live with your wife in a knowledgeable way. Now, the word used here is not factual knowledge, that you know certain factual events or things about the household. It is a more intimate word. It is a word that means to know in a caring, personal way. We have another word for factual knowledge, but this word is most important. Let me suggest to you 2 implications of this. These things come from my reading and experience and talking over the years. They are not original with me, but I will suggest them for our admonition this morning. If we are to live considerately or knowledgeable with our wives, first thing we need to take into effect is that she needs to see and hear that you cherish and delight in her as a person. She needs to hear and to see that you delight in her and cherish her as a person. That simply means, if we put it at its core, you need to begin to express your love in a concrete, emotional, expressive way. She needs to know that those former values that you saw in her when you were dating are still there. And you cherish them in her. That she is special to you. Others do not have a matter in this context. She is singularly alone to you. And so we need to keep this in mind. She is special to you. But along with that, let me suggest a second thought. Not only does she need to see and hear that you cherish and delight in her, but secondly, that she meets vital needs in your life that no other woman can fulfill. She's special to you as a person in a way that no other woman can fulfill. Let me give you a simple illustration of this. Illustrations are hard because they can go broad in so many ways, but let me give you a personal illustration. When I was senior pastor at Northbrook Alliance Church many years ago, the office of the senior pastor was here, and just outside was the secretary's office. One day, for whatever reason, I don't know, my wife came into the office. And I was sitting next to the open door as we were discussing important things. And as she walked by, I saw her. I didn't speak, but I just winked at her. No big deal, I thought. I just winked at my wife. Hi, how you doing? Man, when I went home for lunch, it fantastic. You can't believe what happened. It just said to her that you are important to me, even if your mind are on other matters. So I come to this point, a considerateness or an understanding that loves and cares for her in a way that's significant. The second term I find here is a courtesy that never forgets her needs. The text reads, granting her honor unto the wife as the weaker vessel. Here's another text that we've done a lot of interesting and sometimes incorrect ways. Surely women are not inferior to men, either intellectually, physically, socially, or psychologically. They are not. I was impressed back several years ago when I watched on television the Olympics, which I love to watch. Here was a 19-year-old young woman. She was in the weightlifting contest. They announced there are 325 pounds on the bar. This young woman walked in, reached down, picked it up and pushed it over her head. I thought, wow, I'm not sure many men could do that. Weaker vessel here has a cultural context. In the day of Rome, from where Peter is probably writing, and throughout that Asian period, it was a labor-intense society. They worked physically a lot. So what Peter's asking here for is a kind of a magnanimous spirit, a helpfulness to your wife. That's what he's getting at. He's not getting at contrast at this point. He's asking you simply to be helpful in a good way. Let me make two other deduction points from this. I want to suggest in a courtesy, she needs to know that you enjoy setting a time, quality time, for personal conversation with her. This will be a tough one, gentlemen. Sometimes she's busy at work, all kinds of things are going on, she'd like to stop and tell you about it. You get home and you are weary and tired, so you sit down, plop down on the chair, turn the TV in, and watch the news. And she comes up and starts saying something to you and you grunt. Now that's not always true. I mean, you may be tired and so forth. But so she talks to you and then she says, honey, I want you to know, I spent $50,000 today. That's nice, sweetheart. I'm glad. She needs to know that you do this. Psychologists tell us that one of the fundamental psychological needs of women is to share with someone. We don't do that very well, gentlemen. You're out on a boat with your friend fishing, and you say, oh, I meant to tell you guys, my wife and I are going through a divorce. Really? Do you have a place to live? Whereas a woman would say, oh, I'll bet they're hurting. We'll go up, have you ever known, they'll give them a big hug. Find out what's really going on. They want to know. They want to share with you. And it's important for you to stop and to listen. As a Christian husband, I see my Bible telling me that's part of my responsibility to do this. So to enjoy setting aside quality time for personal, intimate conversation with her. I heard this story among pastors once who said they had a couple in their congregation, and the poor guy, he really had a tough time with this. The only time he could talk to his wife was when they were laying in bed at night. So when they had a problem, he'd say, well, you want to talk? So they both go in and lay down in the bed, and then he could talk. I don't know what method you use, but she needs this as well. So this is important, a courtesy. Let me make it, not only she needs to know that you enjoy setting aside time for personal conversation, but secondly, she needs to know that you understand her by supporting her in areas of both her strength and her limitations. Let me choose a personal. Because my wife is not here. She's on her way back to Boston. So you can't talk to her about me. But I know that my wife, one of her gifts, and we've talked about this, is help. She loves to help. She loves to do things. But she gets herself in deep water sometimes. Sometimes I say, sweetheart, you can't say no. You got to say no sometimes. You're just getting burdened down, worn down. You ought to say no. Then on the other hand, she has some very gifted strengths. Actually, she's a better Christian than I am. But she's very gifted in finances, bookkeeping, this whole area. And one day, this has been several years ago, he says, "Sweetheart, I think I'm going to go to the university." "Really?" "Okay, go ahead. What do you want to do?" "I want to take up micro and macroeconomics." "Really?" "Go ahead. Good luck. I'll be praying for you in that area, because I have no gifts in that at all." It so happened that our oldest daughter, who was studying at the university, was taking the same two courses, so it was an interesting time in our family. We teach who's going to get the good grades. Ended up, Mom got A's, daughter got B's. It was a nice time, but I'm just simply trying to make the point that I try to give confidence to her and strengthen her in the areas of her own strengths. So, a courtesy that never forgets its need. The third word is comprehension. A comprehension that never forgets her spiritual equality with you. Roman world in which Peter is writing, and probably writing this epistle from Rome, was a time when women had no rights at all. They had no rights in the home. They had no rights to their children. They were somebody whose owned, just like one might own some product of some kind. It wasn't until Augustus became king that the rules began to change and lessen up. If for some reason the woman was divorced by her husband, the husband had full rights over all their children. She had no say whatsoever. This is part of the problem with Paul writes once in the area of divorce. Don't you know you might make her into prostitution because she has no way of living. So be careful, Paul writes to them about this. So, my first comprehension. Let me make here again an observation. She needs to know and see that you're making investments in her life that will fulfill her world. She needs to know that God has given, you need to know that God has given to you as a gift. And sometimes you need to grasp the fact that when you are tired and weary and struggling, that she doesn't think because she doesn't communicate with you that somehow he has lost interest in you. But if you take the courage and say, "It's been a tough day at work, people are getting fired and laid off, and I'm just not knowing what to do," share it with you. God has so created women in a special way that they will handle that knowledge in a gracious and thoughtful way. So we need to have a comprehension, a courtesy, then a comprehension that never forgets her spiritual equality with you. Grant her honor as a fellow heir of the grace of life. This, I think, is most important. I'm a foolish husband if I do not take the advice of my wife thoughtfully. She may get me out of trouble if I listen, because she might see things differently than I see them. So a husband needs to listen to his wife. She is an equal spiritual partner before God. She's God's gift to you. And you must never forget this fact. A comprehension that never forgets her spiritual equality with you. Grant her honor, says the text, as a fellow heir of the grace of life. I even broadened it out, but I won't give you my theological opinion here. But I think God has given women to the church that we sometimes fail in places of authority to give their insights as well as we should. It certainly didn't happen in the Old Testament. It should carry over. Final thought. Time is going. A conscience that never forgets the danger of communion with God. The text reads, that your prayers be not hindered. One of the primary things that a mother, or particularly a wife, needs from her husband is the stability and example of a spiritual leader. You and I in our families need to be following Christ with all our heart, soul, and mind. And that brings to our family a great spiritual stability. That's our job. We're not called to be the dictatorial leader who tells everybody how they're supposed to run and jump. We're to be an example. In the spiritual realm is what God called us to be. And so, my thesis this morning. Quite quickly, the greatest gift you can give to your wife today, your mother on Mother's Day, is not a new set of tires for her car. Or that wonderful new kind of saw that you wanted to buy so you bought it for her. You need to give yourself to her. I know that's hard, and we all have to work at it, but I think it is significant. Let's pray. Father, the text is demanding, practically and even thoughtfully, that we as Christian husbands need to assume a greater responsibility in loving and caring for our wives as an example to our children. Help us in this task, I pray in Christ's name. Amen. Greet one another as you go.
Zooming out, stop. No, but I'm done.